So, good morning, good afternoon, evening to all of you, according to your respective locations. And today we are continuing with our series of meetings, study regarding the Raga-vartma-candrika by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. We are in our 24th meeting. Today we are continuing with the study of the 6th verse or prose of the second part of the book of the second illumination. Today is our second meeting studying this 6th verse, and I think it will take one more meeting apart from this one to finish it. One detail, since my connection here is not the best, maybe if all of you may turn off your videos, I think that will help for regarding the streaming. So, well, let's make some brief recap of what we saw in our previous meeting, where we started this 6th prose or verse from this second illumination from the Raga-vartma-candrika. When Vishwanath started speaking about how Bhagavan himself perceives his own godhood in the context of Braja Lila, if he does at all. So first of all, he raises a question, which was like, well, Krishna, Vasudev Nandan Krishna, he performed human-like pastimes in Dwarka, or even in Mathura, with the awareness that I am the Supreme Lord, Vasudev Nandan. But then he asks, so what about Nandanandan Krishna in Vrindavan? Rajendra Nandan Krishna. Did he have the same perfect perception in his Vrindavan pastimes or not? Did he have Ishwar Gyan, I'm God? Was he aware of that or not? So Vishwanath presents a possible reply. Say, if you say yes, he was aware of it, then I will retort, I will reply to that, that he will not have been able to cry tears of fear while he was bound up with ropes by Mother Yashoda in the Braja Lila. So he quotes this Dhamma Bandhana Lila, where Krishna is being tied by Yashoda. So here Vishwanath is taking, before he was speaking from how analyzing in detail the psychology of the Brajavasis, the main subjects possessing certain type of love for the object of love in Braj Krishna. But now he's turning the situation from the other perspective, the vantage point of Bhagavan himself, and Krishna's own perspective being analyzed here. I'm trying with this to create some further differentiation between the love of Braj, again, that's a main point that Vishwanath is trying to make along the Raga-vartma-candrika in this section in particular, further differentiation between love of Braj and that of Mathura and Dwarka, the Pura Lila, the urban pastimes, in contrast to the Braja pastimes, the forest village pastimes, and the different types of Krishna, as we say. Braja Krishna on one side, Mathura Dwarka Krishna on the other. So the point is, okay, in Dwarka and Mathura, Krishna was aware he was God. We knew, we saw that, how he spoke to Vasudeva and Devaki when he was born from them in the prison house. So what to speak in Dwarka, where there's even more Aishwarya. So is this the same in Braj? That's the question he made. If that's the case, why did he cry with Yashoda? Vishwanath himself presents this point. So this is, of course, in this connection, we spoke about the mamata, or the sense of possessiveness that is there in the Braj, which creates particular desires. For example, in Yashoda, she has a particular sense of I and mine in connection to Krishna, in her Vatsalya. And he is my Lal, my Kaneya Lal, my boy, my baby. So I am his mother. So certain desires will come in that context. And those desires would come from the part of the Ragatmikas, in this case, will create a parallel desire in Krishna in order to properly reciprocate. Anukul Seva, in the context of favorable Seva, service, that all the associates are expressing, Ye atamam prapadyanti tam stataiva pajamyaham. Krishna is bound to reciprocate. He mentions that naturally in the Gita. As much as you approach me, I will reciprocate. So that's naturally the way. So in Mathura and Dwarka, as we mentioned, they feel Krishna on one level as a friend, as a relative. That's like Arjuna, for example. He's my friend, but also they have this Ishvara Gyan on some level. They know he's God. So here Krishna reciprocates in that particular combination of modes. But turning back to Raj, we find a different scenario there. Krishna is not feeling that he's God there. Why? Because that will be, if the word exists at all, a misreciprocation to how the Brajavasis are addressing him and approaching him, and how they are approaching him without without even the slightest scent that he is God. So naturally, he will reciprocate with that. Gyan Sunya Bhakti. Bhakti without any tinge of Gyan, of knowledge that Krishna is God, of awareness of his supremacy, of his Aishwarya. So naturally, Krishna is totally, if you will, forgotten that he's God, overwhelmed by the prem of the Brajavasis, which like embrace him from a particular side, not because he's God. They are not loving him because he's God and God should be loved. They love him because they are charmed by him. They are attracted by him in a particular way. So in this way, Vishwanath starts to make this point from the vantage point of Krishna's own psychology perspective in Braj. So then he continued saying, those who explain, he continues giving further purvapaksha, further arguments. Those who explain that he was pretending to be afraid actually when he was crying in front of Jashoda. And that's why he was shedding tears. So Vishwanath said, those who say that are less intelligent. Because if a learned devotee will, to accept this explanation, then present a further argument. Why Kunti Devi will have included, what Kunti Devi included the word moha, which means bewilderment, in her famous statement in the Bhagavad. So he quotes one verse from the context of the prayers of Queen Kunti. When Kunti was saying, Yashoda took up a rope to bind you, she was praying to Krishna, when you committed an offense by smashing the yogurt pot, but your disturbed eyes overflowed with tears, they wash away the kajal, the collyrium of your eyes. And she mentions then, and you were afraid, trying to hide your face, also fear, personified fear, is afraid of you. So such a sight is moha, is bewildering to me. So Vishwanath concludes this section saying that from these words of Kunti Devi, it is known that Aishwarya Gyan was present in her. And that's why she's saying, even fear personifies afraid of you. And with the words frightened of your mother, it is proven, Vishwanath says, that Kunti finds Krishna genuinely afraid in his heart. So if Kunti had known that Krishna was simply pretending to be afraid, then she would not have been bewildered. That's an important point. And Vishwanath makes that argument. If we accept that the crying of Krishna was a show, he will say no. Because someone with Aishwarya Gyan, Ishvara Gyan like Kunti, she was aware Krishna is God. She's declaring fear personified is afraid of you. And that's a very Aishwarya-like statement. But she herself was bewildered. So such a personality wouldn't be bewildered if you were not crying, actually. So we also share the famous example that we already quoted from Uddhava, when he was also bewildered when Krishna, being omniscient, was asking some advice from him and so on. And the last section that we shared in our previous lecture, Vishwanath concludes this section saying, with a further argument, trying to present his point in a comprehensive way, leaving no room for doubts, and he himself presenting the doubts, such in just in case. So he said, yet if we say, okay, we accept, he was bewildered, he was crying, that was not a show, but which was the cause of Krishna's bewilderment. So he says, if we say that he did not know he's the Supreme Lord, then the question arises, what is that covers the eternal knowledge of Krishna, who is the very personification of unending knowledge and bliss? So we see that, going to our example, ignorance, avidya, is the function of the illusory potency of Maya Shakti. And that throwing all living entities into the bondage of material world unveils their knowledge of their constitutional position to make them experience suffering, only suffering. So in the same way, now he gives a parallel, the embodiment of the function of the spiritual potency, or the Chit Shakti, or the Lila Shakti Yoga Maya more specifically, is the one who is covering Krishna's knowledge. The associates of Krishna, the knowledge of them, such as Yashoda and so on, who are actually beyond the gunas. And so they can taste, relish the particular rasa mellows and the joy in connection to Krishna's Braja Lila. And similarly, this Chit Shakti, this Swarup Shakti Prem, different ways to refer to this, also is covering Krishna's own knowledge of his own nature, to enable, again, to facilitate, not to contract, but to facilitate, to enable him to relish a greater abundance of ecstasy. So this is an important point. So Prem, in this case, is also, he mentions this, the last thing he mentions here is Prem is also Krishna's internal intrinsic potency, Swarup, Shakti, and therefore there is no fault at all in that energy covering his Swarup, his identity. So in this way, Vishwanath finishes, or we finished at least, our exposition last class, where he presented this further argument. Krishna is actually bewildered, but such bewilderment is not a product of Maya Shakti. Actually, Maya Shakti, as we mentioned, feels ashamed at some distance, standing at some distance from Krishna, even from Mahavishnu, who activates Maya Shakti with his glance, is not entering in direct touch with what to speak of Raja Krishna, if Mahavishnu himself is not even in touch, direct contact with her. So this mugdata of Krishna, this bewilderment of Krishna in Braj, and the bewilderment of his parishats, his associates in Braj, actually it's not coming from Maya Shakti, but from Lila Shakti, Yoga Maya, which is covering, creating a type of ignorance or illusion by creating a type of knowledge and awareness. As we always say, you are aware of something, you are ignoring something else. If you are looking in one direction, you are not looking in another direction. So in this case, Yoga Maya is covering, but delivering a higher level of relishment. This Lila Shakti is an expression of the Sarup Shakti, is an expression of Prem, and is always in the service of Shaktiman, the energetic source, Bhagavan. So it's his own inner, internal energy, intrinsic potency, and only exists for his pleasure and for the exclusive purpose of increasing his pleasure, increasing his glories, the glories of her master more and more and more. So that's what we saw last class. So today Vishwanath will continue giving like shape to this concept, because he wants to make some further points, and it's important for us to have all these truths clearly established in our understanding. So we will continue today with the second analysis, second part of this sixth verse or prose of the second illumination of Raga-vartma-candrika. So today we will mainly analyze the perspective of the bondage of love, the nature of this bondage of divine love, so-called bondage. We also speak in terms of bondage to refer to the gunas, but here we are speaking in connection to Prem. So I will share with you in the chat the first part. It's there. So I will be reading. It says like this. Just as ignorance binds up the conditioned souls with the ropes of possessiveness, giving them simply misery, and just as prisoners are bound with ropes and chains, which give them much pain, similarly, the body of a respectable person is bound up by valuable, pleasurable, thin clothes, like a shirt on a turban. In the same way, the conditioned soul's ignorance leads to his misery, and Sri Krishna's ignorance makes him very happy, because he is controlled by Prem. Sri Krishna enjoys great happiness in being covered over by Prem, just as a bumblebee feels very pleasant in being enclosed in the world of a lotus flower. Therefore it is said, O Lord, you don't leave the lotus-like hearts of your own devotees. And also it is said, devotees have bound your lotus feet with the ropes of their love. So that will be the topic today, the bondage of love. Very beautiful conception. So in today's section, again, Vishwanath will be presenting, let's say, his conclusion on the present topic, even though we won't finish the sixth verse, but of this particular point that he wants to make in this verse. So he will try to present his conclusion on the present topic that it was already seen from the beginning of this verse, this verse 6, which is that Prema binds up Krishna by covering over his own Ishvara Gyan, his own knowledge of his own Godhood becomes covered, but actually this makes him and the Brajavasis the most happy. So it's a happy covering, if you will, a happy bondage, not like the one we know in this world. So he further illustrates this point. This is a very classical thing in connection to Shastra, that will describe something that is a chintya, something that is a prakrita, something that is supramundane, transrational, beyond our realm of present experience. They will try to give us a glimpse of that by sharing some example that is closer to our own experience as conditioned souls, but making it clear that this is only an example, and the reality that it is being trying to be illustrated is far different from it. So he begins this verse by saying that, illustrating his point with an example containing two different levels of bonding. So he starts saying, ignorance, avidya, anadi avidya, is binding up the soul with the ropes of possessiveness, the sense of I, me, mine, aham mameti, Bhagavatam will say. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, this aham mameti, I, me, mine, is samsara. It's another way of saying samsara. As Guru Maharaj will say, because of attachment, I try to acquire things, I try to own things, and I develop a whole sense of identity in that connection. So my sense of I generally will depend on my sense of mine. That's why I am my attachments, and that's why in the spiritual stage called asakti, my spiritual identity will rise, because it will be an identity based on attachment, but spiritual ones. But in the material realm, my present sense of identity is based on what I think it belongs to me, basically. My house, my husband, my country, my body, and so on. Some sense of I will come from that, from these ropes of possessiveness, mamata. But there's also, as we will see, spiritual mamata, spiritual possessiveness. So he presents here two levels, two different types of bonding with two examples in connection to the bondage of Maya Shakti and the bondage of Yoga Maya, Lila Shakti, Prem, however you may like to term it. So first he speaks about the criminal who is suffering when he's bound up with ropes and chains. And that's an undesirable situation. And second, he's speaking about the very respectable person who is most happy while experiencing the so-called bondage of a valuable shirt, turbans, and garlands. We can call it a type of bondage. Let's call it a type of bondage. So similarly, with these two analogies, he tries to speak about the bondage on one side of the role of the souls who are trapped by Maya Shakti, compared to the ropes and the chains, the painful, miserly-like experience. It felt really miserable. But on the other side, we have the other bondage, so-called bondage. Just in wanting to create the parallel, we use the word the illusion of Krishna, experienced by him as most pleasurable, like garlands. He's engarlanded by Yoga Maya, by divine illusion. That's an ornament to him. No? But in this case, in the material world, ropes and chains are not ornaments, actually. They create misery. So he begins with this particular analogy, just to say, as in the same way that we can speak, he has bondage regarding ropes and chains, he's been tied with that, or he's being tied by beautiful clothes, like a garland, but the latter is very pleasurable. The same way, material illusion is miserable, but spiritual illusion, if you will, divine illusion, brings the most joy, and actually represents the highest level of reality. But if the analogy resource is not enough, he will go back to a second device here. So he will share very beautiful poetic analogy here to further pound his ontological post, to make his point very clear. So he shared the example of a drunken bumblebee, a madhu, a bumblebee who is humming here and there and becomes addicted to drinking the sweet nectar from a particular flower, and eventually becomes locked up within the whirl, you say, of a lotus petal. He becomes so much intoxicated there that he cannot leave the nectar. So eventually the night comes and the lotus closes. So basically, he becomes trapped, if you will. He has some bondage, experiencing some bondage, but he feels very happy because he's relishing the honey of the lotus flower. So similarly, Krishna, who is known as a bumblebee in Vrindavan, he's the bumblebee of Braj, Madhusudan, Madhupati, Madhurani Pate, Akilam Madhuram, Madhuram Madhuram. So many songs speaking of Krishna as a Madhu, who drinks the nectar of the lotus face like of the gopis. So he's enjoying the greatest happiness in drinking the honey of love, if you will, drinking the wine of love from the Brajavasis. The Brajavasis specifically love. He becomes intoxicated, drunken, and he becomes locked up in the lotus, in the lotus of their hearts, if you will, of these pure devotees. And he gets drunk inside of that, and he cannot get out of there. He becomes trapped. In other words, control. Pibata Bhagavatam Rasamalaya. Let's drink this nectar eternally, ad infinitum. So the point is, in the same way that the bumblebee is trapped in the lotus drinking nectar and doesn't wish to leave the place and is in a total drunken state, in the same way Krishna is inside the lotus like a bumblebee drinking the nectar of the hearts of the Brajavasis, and he has no desire to ever leave the hearts of his devotees. Sadabo hridayam maham sadunam hridayam tvaham madanyatti na jananti naham tibhyu managapi. It's said in the Bhagavad. And there's not overtly expression to the Brajavasis there, but it can be clearly established. He says, I am in the heart of my devotees, and the devotees are my heart. I do not know any other one apart from them, and they do not know anyone apart from me. I mean, ultimately, that verse is speaking about, even though this is speaking by Narayan to Durvasa Muni in the Bhagavad, ultimately that's Krishna speaking about himself and the Brajavasis. I don't know anyone else. I even don't know myself as God in relation to them. So this way, like a drunken bumblebee, he doesn't want to leave their hearts. And if that's not enough, Vishwanath here will further support his idea with two verses from the Bhagavad. One comes, he only quotes 2 lines, small lines, as you have seen there, between quotation mark. So the first one are the prayers to Lord Garbhodakasai Vishnu, when Brahma is speaking there. This is coming from the 3rd canto of the Bhagavad, 9th chapter, 5th verse. Now, Vishwanath only quotes again a line. I will share with you, I will read the whole verse here. Brahma is saying to Garbhodakasai, O Lord, you are unable to give up the lotus-like hearts of your devotees, who smell through their ears the fragrance of your lotus bud feet, brought by the wind of the Vedas, and take your lotus feet as the greatest treasure through Prema Bhakti. And Vishwanath in his Sadartha Darshini comments on this verse saying, just as they do not give up their greed for your lotus feet, you also do not give up them, being greedy for their lotus hearts filled with sweet prem. They mutually bring each other under control. They mutually, in other words, are bumblebees and lotuses towards each other. Krishna is the bumblebee, and the devotee entering the heart of the lotus devotees, the lotus of the hearts of the devotees, and vice versa. And again, in this section, there is no clear mention of Vrindavan and Brajavasis. Brahma is speaking in a generic way, God and his devotees. So if this is the case for God and his devotees, how he reciprocates in kind generally, what to speak more specifically regarding how Krishna reciprocates with the Brajavasis and vice versa. So that's the first pramana. And the second evidence that Vishwanath is sharing is coming also from the Bhagavad, of course, our supreme pramana. And here, Kavi Jogendra is speaking to Raj, Nimi, the king, Nimi Maharaj. This is coming in the 11th canto of the Bhagavad, 2nd chapter, and verse 55. So let me share also, Vishwanath shares a brief line. So let's share the whole verse. Share also what Vishwanath says when he comments on this Bhagavad verse. So Kavi Jogendra is saying, Nimi Maharaj, O Maharaj, when Sri Hari, who can destroy all the sins of anyone who even accidentally pronounces his holy name, does not leave the heart of someone who has bound his lotus feet with the ropes of love, then such a person is called the greatest Bhagavat, or the greatest devotee. Mm. So here also in this verse, the mention is someone who has bound his lotus feet with the ropes of love. So the idea of rope, of bonding, of bondage is here. And Vishwanath comments here saying, this verse answers the question, why does the Lord not leave the temple of their hearts? Again, as we mentioned, he's like a bumblebee trapped in the lotus, or here the analogy is the temple of the heart, Mama Mandir. So Vishwanath replies, the devotee binds the lotus feet of the Lord to his heart by the ropes of affection. Just as Yashoda, again, famous example, very, very symbolic of the binding element with the rope. Just as Yashoda bound Krishna to the mortar by her prem, not by a rope, but by her prem, the Lord who binds all jivas by the chains of Maya is bound by the chains of prem by the devotee. This is the essence of all his qualities. The Lord himself does not give up the heart of his devotee. So he mentioned something very nice here, Vishwanath. We can ascertain through this last word that the subjugation of Bhagavan by the bondage of the ropes of his devotee's love for him represents his favorite quality in himself. In other words, and again, here we are speaking, this verse is speaking about Bhagavan, God, his devotees. He's not speaking specifically Krishna and the Brajavasis, but in Krishna and the Brajavasis in Vrindavan, we find the ultimate application of all these statements. All the statements that we find in the Bhagavad, speaking about the glories of the devotees, the glories of the love of the devotees, the glories of how Krishna reciprocates with them, all of these, even when they are not speaking about Krishna directly, all of them apply ultimately to how Krishna reciprocates with the Brajavasis and vice versa. All the Bhagavad, actually, all the statements of the Bhagavatam converge there in Braj and lead us to the 10th canto and to the love of the Brajavasis. So we should understand all this in proper context. So here, Vishwanath in his commentary, he's mentioning this important point. God, and especially Braja Krishna's favorite quality in himself is that he becomes a slave, controlled by the love of his devotee. That's his topmost quality for himself, about himself in his consideration. That's one of the qualities of Prem, as Rupa Goswami would have said, Sri Krishna Akarshani. Prem not only is a condensation of Bhava, but it has the power to attract Akarshani, Krishna. Krishna is known as the all attractive, interestingly. So you will feel, oh, everyone is attracted to him. But what to speak, those people whom he is attracted in relation to. So the all attractive is attracted to something. So how attractive must be that? So here we are speaking about that, the particular love that is found in Braj, that is making the all attractive becoming the all attracted one. And vice versa, of course. Brajavasis are all attractive to Krishna, but all attracted to Krishna as well, and vice versa. So full reciprocation. Vrindavan is the realm of full reciprocation between both the Absolute and his devotees. So what we see here before going to the next section, the union in love that we find here in Braj implies that nor Krishna nor his devotees possess any freedom regarding each other, if you will. All one is bonded to the other, one is a slave of the other. As Srila Sriramas will say, Krishna loves slaves too much. He wants us to be his slave, but he loves slavery so much that he himself becomes a slave to his devotees, and vice versa. So both parties are slave to each other. Aham bhakta paradino yasha tantri vadija, Krishna says. Aham bhakta paradino, I'm totally under the control of my devotees, he's saying there. And again, this is Vishnu speaking to Durvasa. What to speak of Raja Krishna speaking to the Brajavasis. He Ashra Tantra Ivaduja, he says. Ashra Tantra, I'm generally known as Swatantra, means supremely independent. But in the context of the influence of the Swarup Shakti in the form of Braja Bhakti, I'm Ashra Tantra. I'm totally non-independent. I'm totally dependent on their prem. My life depends basically on them. Krishna's subjective experience in Braj. Each one, again, but again, this is reciprocal. So both Krishna and the Brajavasis, both of them are like a puppet in the hands of the other. Remember that free will, interestingly, I won't go into detail here, it will be too much, but free will means we have the chance of choosing between two things. Of course, many things, but two things in brief words: Maya Shakti, Swarup Shakti. But once you have chosen properly, in case you have chosen Swarup Shakti, that's it. So what to speak of Krishna and the Nitya Siddhas? They have not been conditioned ever. They are totally enlightened, and for eternity, forever, from Anadi, without the beginning, they are choosing each other from time without the beginning. So they do not have another choice. That's my point. Their free will is gone in that sense. They don't have a second option. I will choose someone else apart from Krishna, or Krishna will think I will choose someone else apart from the brother. They don't have another choice, and they don't want to have another choice. But their free will, in this case, their absolute freedom is in the context of the so-called slavery. And inside that choice, that eternal choice of love that they made to each other, their successive choices will play out in the context of that beginningless mutual acceptance. They have this beginning mutual acceptance between Krishna and the Brajavasis. So in the context of that, they will exercise their enlightened will, if you will. So that's Leela. That's what we call Leela. That's something very different than karma. So let's continue. Today, class may take me a little bit more. Oh, sorry. Someone told me that you didn't see what I sent before, because yes, I didn't realize that I sent only to one person, not to all. So I'm sending again here the previous text. Sorry for that. And now I'm sending the one that I will share now, which is the second one. There it is. So thank you, Arjun Siddhi, for mentioning. So I will read the second part now. It says like this. Vishwanath will continue establishing this point. Just as one experiences in this world the 5 kinds of misery to a greater or lesser extent, according to the degree to which one is covered over by ignorance, so also various degrees of prem covers over the knowledge and opulence of both its object, Vishaya, and subject, Ashraya, to a greater or lesser extent, expanding innumerable varieties of transcendental ecstasy according to the level of their love. Thus, the love of Yashoda and other Brajavasis, the Ashraya of Prem, binds their Vishaya or object, Krishna, with the ropes of possessiveness, Mamata, and vice versa. By their mutual love, Vishaya and Ashraya bring one another under control, thus showering an excess of joy upon both. On the other hand, the Prem that is mixed with awareness of the Lord's great opulence found in Vasudev, Devaki, and other residents of Mathura and Dwarka is not capable of bestowing such happiness upon Sri Krishna and his devotees. So we see how Vishwanath continues pounding the post in this direction and giving some examples from our own experience as conditioned souls in this verse, in connection to our experience in this world, and comparing it with the other world in connection to Maya Shakti and Yoga Maya, and to the bondage of these two. Sometimes, as we see, analogies, examples are really helpful to illustrate something that may be beyond our grasp, our present experience, but so we can have at least a clear picture, a clear idea of how one thing is categorically different from the other. And you can see Krishna Lila is human-like, as we say, so it tends to be like confused by some people with something ordinary. So in order to preserve the dignity of the Nara Lila of Braj, the acharyas have make so much effort and try to explain this from so many ways, as we have a clear picture. This is not ordinary. This is totally different. So he is trying again here, he's walking the tightrope of the Nara Lila of Vrindavan and our so-called Nara Lila or Srishti Lila, basically, our human experience and Krishna human-like Lila. Remember, human, but like also, which speaks about something different as well. So our experience in Krishna is similar, yes, but sufficiently different as well. So both things should be in place so we really understand what's the goal of Raga Nuga Bhakti, Vrindavan love. So in this connection, the example that he gives has to do with avidya. He already spoke about avidya in the previous section. So now he will mention some of the expressions of this avidya. He speaks about ignorance, covering the knowledge of the Vada Jivas, who will receive from Maya Shakti 5 kinds of misery. Actually, in one degree of another, of course, no? The kleshas, as we know them. And klesha means misery. So they are divided in different way, but one classical definition of kleshas is fivefold. So here, Vishwanath speaks of them. He doesn't mention them in detail. So let's mention them in detail, at least not so much in detail, but at least mentioning them. So 5 kinds of misery that a conditioned soul will receive by embracing, if you will, Maya Shakti to a greater or lesser extent. So the first one is avidya itself, ignorance, avidya. The second one is called asmita, which means egotism. The third one will be raga. Raga means attachment, as you may know. The fourth one is dvesha, which means the opposite of raga, which is repulsion. We attach to something, and after some time, we want to get rid of that. And the fifth one is abhinivesh. Abhinivesh, which means mundane absorption, basically. So these are the 5 types of kleshas that here Vishwanath mentions: avidya, ignorance; asmita, egotism; raga, attachment; dvesha, repulsion; and abhinivesha, or mundane absorption. So he says, in the same way that the conditioned soul go through this misery, different miseries, by choosing Maya Shakti, similarly, not in the same way, of course, similarly, prema is covering over the knowledge of the spiritual truth, is covering the awareness of Aishwarya, of both the Vishaya and the Ashraya of Prem. In other words, it's covering both Krishna and the devotees. Remember these terms, please. We should get accustomed to them. Vishaya means object, Ashraya means vessel or shelter. So Krishna is the object of love, and the Brajavasis are the shelter of that love, or vice versa. For Krishna, the Brajavasis are the object of his love, and he is the shelter of particular love for them. So both in Vishaya and Ashraya, this Prem, this unique function of this Swarup Shakti, is covering over the knowledge of Aishwarya, the awareness of Godhood in both directions. So there, and in this way, what's the purpose of that covering? Not only covering by itself, in and for itself, but to give them corresponding amounts of varieties of transcendental experience. Remember, Prem is all about mamata. That's one of the main features of Prem, possessiveness, a particular way of seeing the other person in terms of a specific, passionate, intense relationship. In Braj, I'm referring. So they do not see anything else, only mamata, how I love Krishna according to my particular subjectivity, and how Krishna reciprocates in kind in that same subjectivity. Jashoda is absorbed in seeing Krishna, my darling, my baby. And Krishna will be absorbed and reciprocating in kind, my ma, and so on. So both parties are totally absorbing each other, relishing in higher and higher waves of Prem. But in order for that to happen, Aishwarya has to be covered. So that's the function, one of the effects of Prem. So Vishwanath gives some parallel with our experience as conditioned souls. As we are covered and bound by Maya Shakti, some form of covering and binding is there in the Brajalila because of Prem. Anantadas Babaji, in his commentary, he mentioned that in the sadhaka, let's go to our case for a minute, because we have been speaking about conditioned souls, ragatmikas or premikas, nitya siddhas. But what about ourselves? We are in the middle of that. As Guru Maharaj will say, sadhaka is not a conditioned soul anymore, still, even though there is some conditioning there, he's work in progress, but he's not a siddha at the same time, a perfected being. So he's kind of in between. So for the sadhaka, Anantadas Babaji mentioned prema is present to an atomic extent, if you will, in the form of what has come to our life. Bhakti is already there in our heart, so we could say it's an atomic version of what eventually will become officially prema. And he then mentions in other associates like Narada and Vyas, that will be present to a greater or lesser extent, but in the Brajavasis, it is present to the utmost extent. So the presence of prem is considerable in Braj, if you will. And ultimately, as we know, in Srimati Radharani, that's the ultimate presence, if you will, of prem. She is herself the greatest form of prem. Mahabhav Swarupini, she's the very personification of the highest expression of divine love. So the point is, this great amount of love that we find in Braj will cover over all knowledge, all awareness of any Aishvarya in both Krishna and the Brajavasis. Because the Brajavasis also has Aishvarya. When they come in the Gaur Leelas, we always say, Manjari, like Rupa Manjari, comes like Rupa Goswami and exhibited such a degree of knowledge, of detachment. All this has to do with Aishvarya also. It's a form of Aishvarya. Different from the idea of Aishwarya in connection to Bhagavan, but my point is both parties have some Aishwarya, but in Vrindavan, this is not being perceived because such density, condensed presence of love is covering all these functions, knowledge and awareness of any Aishwarya in both Krishna and the Brajavasis. Because what? Why? Because if that happens, that will allow them, both of them, Krishna, to completely relish the pure mellow of Brajavav uninterruptedly, and also will allow the Brajavas to fully relish themselves the divine sacred static rapture in connection to Krishna's own love for them. Totally, both parties, they totally free from any obstacle that may come from Aishwarya. At that moment, Aishwarya will represent a disturbance to the free flow of affection from Krishna to Brajavasis, from Brajavasis to Krishna. So try to understand this point and how happy Krishna feels there, how happy the Brajavasis feel there. So in other words, still going back to Krishna's own perspective, Braja Krishna, he's not enjoying, we could say that Krishna doesn't enjoy so much to control hundreds and thousands of universes as he enjoys being controlled by his devotees. He's not enjoying so much his, all-pervading existence as to be in the lap, trapped in the lap of his mother. He's not enjoying so much to embrace unlimited galaxies as to be embraced by the gopis, or his friends. He doesn't enjoy so much the Aishwarya Bhaktas who are praying to him, all God are delivering all these hymns. He will enjoy more hearing his friends criticizing him. He doesn't enjoy so much the devas putting their heads to the ground as he enjoys he himself putting his head on the feet of Sri Radha. So that's the God we worship, as we know. That's the Krishna we worship, the one who bounds to love, who inclined his head in the feet of Radha. Dehi palavam padavam udaram, says Gita Govinda. This critical moment where Krishna put his head on the feet of Srimati Radharani, of the personification of love. As we were recalling the other day, when Sri Radha is in man with Krishna, she's in jealous love with him, criticizing him. Krishna enjoys that so much he forgets all the prayers of the Vedas and so on. The Vedas themselves are praying to him. He has no ears for that. So again, very intense prem. So in this way, Vishwanath concludes this section mentioning that both Krishna and the Brajavasis come under mutual control. Vishaya and Ashraya. Try to remember. Binding each other with the ropes of loving mindness. Mindness, we'll say, like possessiveness. And this mindness covers their knowledge and awareness of any possible Aishvarya, and allowing the experience of a level of bliss that is not available in other places. That's the last point that Vishwanath is making in this verse. The experience of the Brajavasis is not available to Puravasis, to urban devotees like Devaki and so on, because their love is mixed with certain level of Ishvar Gyan, of awareness Krishna is God. So naturally, he is bound to reciprocate in kind. As we already mentioned that before, the love of the Puravasis make Krishna aware, at least on a certain level, of his own godhood. We are not in Vaikuntha here, but there is some awareness, some level of that. So Krishna reciprocates with them in kind. Try to remember this point. But in Braj, again, Krishna never considers himself to be God. Not even for a moment. That's the point. Try to understand that. Try to understand who is the one, who is our Istadev, if you will. He's not sometime, oh yes, I'm God. Yeah, I'm right. No, not even for a moment. There's no space in between for him to remember that, to be aware of that, because the love of the Brajavasis is like a permanent current, very dense, not like fully invading all his pores of his being. He doesn't, and again, the point is, Krishna never considers himself to be God even for a moment, because the Brajavasis never think of him as God even for a moment. So he reciprocates in kind with that level of non-awareness of his Godhood. Since the Brajavasis are 24/7 seeing Krishna in terms of their love, Krishna in 24/7 format is reciprocating, and thus he remains mugdata, bewildered, by the unique prem, this Gyan Sunya Bhakti. And he only thinks of himself of, I'm Jashoda's son, Subhal's friend, Radha's lover. That's his identity. That's himself. That's the supreme personality of Godhead, in one sense. So, in other words, just to close this section, the unique Madhurya of Krishna, remember Krishna, Braja Krishna in particular, he has these four main features that are only present in him, not even in other aspects of divinity, nor in Narayan, nor in other forms of Krishna. His Lila Madhurya, Rupa Madhurya, Prema Madhurya, and Benu Madhurya, Srila Rupa Goswami describes in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. All these unique features that make him who he is in Braj and higher other manifestations of the divinity, all these qualities are relative to the prem of his parikars. If you take out the love of the Brajavasis, you don't have Prem Madhurya, Benu Madhurya, Rupa Madhurya, Lila Madhurya. You take out the Brajavasis and Krishna becomes something else, if you will. So this is in this way. He reciprocates in different ways. So the prem of Yashoda make Krishna wanted to drink milk from her breast. You follow? No? That's the prem of Yashoda who makes him who he is. The prem of Nanda makes Krishna to put Nanda's paduka sandals of his head and carry them to his father. The prem of the friends of Krishna, of the Gopas, makes Krishna to play with them and take them on his shoulders. The prem of the Gopis make Krishna to fall to their feet and beg to Sri Radha forgiveness for having been with Chandravali and so on. Even though that's necessary so Radha can experience man and Krishna can experience the pleasure of Radha's man. So in this way, everything is like operating in this way. So, and since again, the prem of Radha is the highest of all in Braj, the beauty of Krishna reaches its climax by being close to her. That's why Prabhupada will say, Krishna by himself is beautiful, but next to Radha, he attains his topmost beauty. The higher the prem, the higher the Krishna, if you will. And that's why Guru Maharaj say one thing is not different from the other. You can speak about Krishna and Krishna Prem and two totally separate things. It's not possible. One thing is corresponding with the other. So What else? Let's share one last section. Maybe, as I told you, I may extend some extra minutes today, but as we can close the topic for today, and we will share some time for questions, or hopefully also. So I'll share in the chat. This is the last part of this section, not of the whole verse, but of today's sharing. So Vishwanath will conclude this section by saying as the following. Therefore, Sri Krishna, being bewildered by the maternal love of Brajeshwari Sri Yashoda, does not know about his own godhood. When some disturbance is caused by a demon or by a forest fire in Braj, then Krishna manifests his omniscience. But that is only for the sake of protecting such loving devotees. And the Lila Shakti, or play potency, causes him to momentarily display his omniscience. Previously, it was already explained that his inconceivable potency enables him to be omniscient in order to accept the service offered to him by the practicing devotees, even when he is bewildered by loving bliss. So the conclusion, of course, is always achintya, as you can see. But here Vishwanath is presenting this possible, if you will, argument, even though he's not framing it in that way. But okay, but he's so much, Krishna is so drenched in Madhurya, in Mugdata, in Vrindavan. But what, when he kills the demons with his dealing, how this operates, how this awareness, this omnipresence, omnipotency. So here Vishwanath is addressing this, concluding this section. Again, not the whole verse yet. Next class we will do that. So he concludes this section here by addressing another perspective of the same point, basically. So the point is how this bewildered Braj Krishna, as we have described, so bewildered in such a degree, he's not aware of his godhood, but he simultaneously is exhibiting Aishwarya for certain specific purposes. Like as he's mentioned here, facing demons, killing, annihilating forest fires, or whatever other danger may come to the Brajavasis, like Indra sending some torrential rains or whatever. So the point is that he displays some energies like omniscience at those moments, but this is only in the context of serving the Brajavasis. You follow? So his omniscience take the role of nourishing, reciprocating with the Brajavasis. He's only thinking in terms protecting them, serving my mama, serving my friends, serving my, even though it's omniscience, which is not enacting that function, all that is in the context of the predominance of Madhurya, of intimacy. So in this way, this is revealed within Sri Krishna by his inconceivable potency, without affecting, at the least, the mutual loving exchange. So Vishwanath is emphasizing this conclusion by reminding us of something he already presented right at his introduction of the topic at the same time. He speaks about Lila Shakti, how this Lila Shakti, another way of speaking of Yoga Maya, is causing him to express omniscience while remaining bewildered and so on. And he shares some previous example he already gave to make this clear. And which was the example at the introduction of this topic, maybe you remember. He started with the point, even when Krishna remains muktata, or bewildered, the potency of omniscience may be seen in him for accepting the worship of the sadhakas. Remember when Vishwanath presented the question, if we are worshiping Braja Krishna and he's bewildered, forgotten his God, what about our prayers to him in Braj? Do they touch him? Do they reach him? So he presented this idea. He remains bewildered, but his omniscience is there somehow or other. And one of the services of the mission, apart from protecting the Brajavasis, in this case, will be accepting the worshipping of the sadhaka. So the point, of course, again, the conclusion will be achintya. This simultaneous and apparent contradiction, because we have mugdata and sarvajñata, bewilderment and omniscience existing together. This apparent contradiction should be known to be created by his achintya shakti, his inconceivable potency. In him, that can happen. One thing won't affect the other, but both of them will be operating accordingly. So in Krishna, every contradiction becomes harmonized in a higher synthesis. And that's the purpose of his achintya shakti, agatana agatana payasi shakti, that makes the impossible possible. So let me finish. Again, I told you, give me some extra minutes today. Since we have concluded speaking about achintya shakti, let's share some extra words on this idea of inconceivable potency, that sometimes it's called achintya shakti, but in this verse also was invoked with the term of lila shakti. Lila shakti, especially in Braj. Lila shakti, Jogamaya. So we already spoken about Jogamaya in our previous lecture. So let's finish today also speaking about Jogamaya, mentioning some extra features about herself that we didn't mention last class. So it is said about Jogamaya that she has two aspects. One called Bimukha Mohini, the other called Unmukha Mohini. So Bimukha Mohini is the one who bewilders those people who are negative to Krishna. Bimukha Mohini. One example famous is the one of Kamsa. Remember, he was hearing one voice from the sky, which was announcing the 8th child of Devaki will kill you. So she tried to kill Devaki eventually. And it is said that because of the influence of Jogamaya, he was bewildered by hearing that voice coming from the sky. And then when he took Jogamaya, remember the girl, baby girl that was born from Devaki, the so-called 8th child of Devaki was a girl. So she took her. It was Jogamaya. Remember, Krishna was born in Braj, and Jogamaya immediately followed him. That implies wherever Krishna goes, especially Braj, Jogamaya is there. In this case, Jogamaya went to Mathura, and Kamsa took her from the hands of Devaki, and immediately Jogamaya became Mahamaya before Kamsa. So it is said that when Kamsa tried to throw her to the floor, she went up to the sky and started to chastise with words Kamsa. So the point is that in this way, those who are adverse, negative to Krishna, won't be able to enter in touch with real Jogamaya, but only will enter in touch with Mahamaya, never with Jogamaya. But this is an aspect of Jogamaya, if you will, a shadow-like aspect for those who had that disposition. And the second aspect of Jogamaya is Unmukha Mohini. So Unmukha Mohini refers, Mohini has to do with bewildering, but in this case, Unmukha Mohini will refer to the Shakti which attracts, what we have been describing today, attracts both Bhagavan and his associates. And even though Krishna is the supreme, he will be bewildered, he will, under her influence. And this is possible, again, as we say, Bhagavan is the receptacle. How do you say in English this word? Receptacle of all contradiction. So in him, everything is perfectly harmonized. His expression is Aishwarya, Madhurya. Madhurya is these leelas who are not violating the human level of possibility. So all this allows Krishna on one side to remain as the source of everything, and at the same time to eternally locate himself as the son of Nanda, for example. So such a situation is only possible because Bhagavan is accompanied by this way, this aspect of Jogamaya, Unmukha Mohini, which allows us, another word, as it says, Agatana Agatana Patiyasi Shakti, the power which makes possible the impossible. So we can conclude in this connection that due to this effect of Jogamaya, if Krishna will see himself as God, or someone else will see himself as God, that will be, for the Brajavasis, that will be a type of Mahamaya illusion, if you will. No? If someone in Brajavasis say, Krishna is the Supreme Lord, that's not Jogamaya. They will say, oh, that's Mahamaya, you are in Maya, basically, something like that. But in our particular case, it's different. As sadhakas, if I say to you, Krishna is not God, you will say, Maharaj, you are in Maya. How can you say such a thing? But in Vrindavan, the things go upside down. So again, the point is, in our particular case, in the present moment, we have to remember Krishna is God, Supreme Personality of Godhead. If we hunker to someday forget that and start to see him in terms of Brajavav. Another one famous mention of Yogamaya is given in the Bhagavad, in the 10th canto, 28th chapter, 13th verse, in the context of Varuna kidnapping Nanda Maharaj, Krishna going to rescue him, and so on, right before the Rasa Panchadhyaya. So this particular verse says that certainly, interestingly, says the person of this world are wandering through different realms, higher and lower realms, and that those realms will be attained by them through different activities executed according to their desires and without full knowledge. This way, they do not know their real objective. So the verse seems to be describing a wandering soul in this material world, going here and there by the strength of karma. But actually, this verse is a glorification to the Brajavasis, because it's Yogamaya which make the Brajavasis, again, to be unaware of Krishna's divinity, unaware of other goals. Interestingly, Vishwanath Chakravarti comments this verse, paraphrasing Krishna, and he says that through lack of knowledge of their soul, some form of avidya, through desires and through karma, activities in this case, Krishna says, my father and the inhabitants of Raj have become confused in this world, in the Prakat Lila, Bhoma Vrindavan. So this confusion arises only because they think themselves ordinary people for the purpose of human-like pastimes. In this role, they do not know their own exalted positions of appearing in Braj, which is rarely achieved by others. When my father saw the opulence of Varuna, which is material, he then considered this Vrindavan to be lower than the planet of Varuna, even though it is the essence of Vaikuntha, Mahavaikuntha. Thus, Krishna concludes through the mouth of Vishwanath, the coward men think themselves lower than Varuna and think of liberation and Vaikuntha as higher than the great sweetness they taste in offering their love to me as their son. Liberation and Vaikuntha are both dependent on me. I am not dependent on them, but it is seen on some circumstances that I am dependent on Prem. Though it is evident to all, the Brajavasis do not recognize it. So very beautifully, Vishwanath is describing the awareness or lack of awareness of the Brajavasis and their own humility in their Prem. I'm so fallen, I'm ordinary, we are ordinary village people. Varuna is higher than us. Brahman and Vaikuntha is higher than being here. But the interesting thing is they want to remain there. But no, the point is, so in this way, the Brajavasis are, due to the influence of Yogamaya, they are not able to recognize the glory of their own position. And that's the arrangement of the humility that comes in Prem, as Guru Maharaj will say. Narada comes to Vrindavan to take darshan of the Brajavasis. And Brajavasi will think, oh, one devotee came, let's have darshan of him and be purified by his association. Well, actually, Narada is feeling, I'm the purified one here. But due to this lack of ability of the Brajavasis, because of Yogamaya of recognizing their own glorious position, sometimes the Brajavasis, they develop a desire of, oh, let's have an experience of Vaikuntha. That's why in the Bhagavad, they ask Krishna, show us Vaikuntha. But why they ask show us Vaikuntha? Because they never saw Vaikuntha, because they are eternally liberated souls in Vrindavan. So there is some humility, there is some curiosity, but also it is a fact that they want to see Vaikuntha because they've never been in Vaikuntha, they will never be there. So Krishna shows to them Vaikuntha and all these realms to please them because they wanted that. There was the whimsical curiosity. Krishna just lives to satisfy that. But after seeing those realms, what happens? The Brajavasis actually increase their attachment to Krishna and Vrindavan. They are not wanting to go to Vaikuntha. It's not that Krishna shows Vaikuntha, say, okay, let's go there in Aishwarya, Bhav, and serve in Dasya. No, their own attachment to Braj increases. So that's again Yogamaya's arrangement. And also Yogamaya is mentioned in the Chatur Shloki of the Bhagavad. These 4 original verses, specifically in the 34th verse of the 9th chapter of the 2nd canto, which Vishwanath Chakravarti overtly is not speaking about Yogamaya, but Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is translating it and commenting on that in a very unique way. So if you want, as part of homework, you can read Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's translation and commentary to this verse. Second canto, 9th chapter, 34th verse. This is, if I'm not mistaken, the second of the 4th essential verse of the Bhagavad Chatushloki. So to conclude, we see here how this actually supreme reality, the ultimate reality, implies necessarily to be under the influence of a certain type of illusion, paradoxically. That's called Yogamaya, this paradoxical, interesting potency. So supreme reality, supreme enlightenment, supreme awareness implies divine illusion, some type of illusion. They are not aware of something in order to be fully aware of something else. Krishna is my something. So, as you know, the actions that are executed under the influence of Mahamaya are called karma, but the movements that are executed under the influence of Yogamaya, under her shelter, will receive the name of Lila. And very especially, this word Lila will be connected and applicable to Vrindavan, Braja Lila. As Guru Maharaj will say, this word Lila generally is not connected to Shiva Lila, Brahma Lila, even Narayan Lila, but Krishna Lila, and especially Braja Lila, where Krishna is only absorbed in playing. But as Guru Maharaj will say, play requires power, and that's why God, one word for God is Deva, and the root of Deva is Div, the Sanskrit root, and Div means to play. So in connection to God, Deva. So to be God means to play. As much the modern power, God, play requires power, Guru Maharaj will say. In order to take a vacation, you need some bank account and so on. So Krishna is only playing. So the ones who is only playing means he's the all-powerful, even though that power is not overtly present in Braj. So in this Braja Lila, just to finish, give me 1 minute, this Yogamaya will appear in two forms also, because we kind of speak about Yogamaya as some sort of abstract and energetic abstraction, but also it has its personified presentation, mainly in two forms, Purnamasi and also Brinda Devi. So I won't enter into detail here, but briefly, Purnamasi, as you know, she manifests as a very old, elderly lady from the forest, and she's the guru of the whole Braj. She's the guru there, and she's giving advice to different Brajavasis in a very wise way, according to the best way to execute all of these infinite services that daily are going on in Braj, all different Leelas. She's also considering, it's called Samasti Gata Lila Adhistatri Devata. Samasti Gata Lila Adhistatri Devata, which means she's the presiding deity of the whole Krishna Lila, from beginning to end, from tip to toe, as we mentioned. She's really presiding over this realm. Purnamasi Devi Ki Jai. And also the other manifestation is Brinda Devi. She's the presiding deity of this confidential, especially Madhurya Leelas between Radha and Krishna and the gopis in different kunjas and different caves. And she appears in the form of a young cowherd girl who is leading the section of gopis known as Dutikas. Dutika means like messengers, female messenger, Dutika Sakis. So because of her order, all the different flowers of Vrindavan bloom in a particular way according to the necessity of the Leela, particular seasons and weathers, different fragrances coming, the different winds blowing from different directions properly according to the circumstance. So she's orchestrating all this as well. So these two are personifications of this Yogamaya. And actually the gopis in the famous Vastraharana Leela, as you know, the pastime where Krishna is still in the clothes of the gopis, they are worshipping Yogamaya, Katyayani actually, which is a form of Yogamaya, because they want to obtain Krishna as their husband, as you know. So actually, Katyayani is a partial manifestation of Yogamaya. And also we can relate, if you will, Yogamaya is a partial manifestation of Sri Radha, because Yogamaya is a function of the Swarup Shakti, and Srimati Radharani is the very personification of the Swarup Shakti, the Adi Shakti, the source of all potency. So if we are worshipping Srimati Radharani, the worship of all her different manifestations and plenary portions will be included there. And furthermore, if we worship Sriman Mahaprabhu, he's both Radha and Krishna combined. Radha, Krishna, Nahi Anya. With all their respective manifestations. If we worship Mahaprabhu, both Radha, Krishna, all that manifestation will be worshipped therein. So in the same way, interestingly, since we mentioned Mahaprabhu, in the same way that Yogamaya is present in Braj, in all these forms that we describe, it is mentioned that also she appears in Sri Navadvip according to the mood of the lila, expressing certain functions, in a way called as Prodhamaya, not Yogamaya, but Prodhamaya, to serve there eternally. Sri Sachinandan Gaura Hari, Sriman Mahaprabhu ki jai, Sri Navadvip Dham ki jai. So as we also mentioned some time ago when Kanaram made one question, in some particular way, according to the mood of the Gaur Lila, of course, Mahaprabhu also became fully controlled by the robes of love from his devotees. This is the main topic today. There's this famous verse in the Chaitanya Charitamrita where Damodar is speaking to Mahaprabhu. When Mahaprabhu was not, in the context of Mahaprabhu, denying himself to give his darshan to Prataparudra Maharaj, as you know, the instance of the Lila. Externally, he was saying, the king is the personification of mundane existence. I'm a sannyasi, I have nothing to do with him. But internally, he wanted that. He wanted to, because Prataparudra Maharaj was a great devotee. So in that situation, Damodar tells to Mahaprabhu, Jadyapi Ishvara Tumi Paramas Satantra, Tatapi Swabhavaha Prem Paratantra. Which means, although you are the supreme personality of Godhead, Ishwar, and you are Paramas Satantra, you are completely independent, still, Swabhave, your nature is such that how prema paratantra, that you are dependent on the love and affection of your devotees. That's your nature. That's how this lives in you. So we see this in the Gaur Lila also, which is part of our goal as Raga Bhaktas. We are especially speaking about Vrindavan. That's the main focus of Vishwanath here. But we have this second window of opportunity into the Nitya Navadvip. So it's also nice to invoke all the topics we are speaking and how they express themselves in the context of Gaur Lila as well. So some words I want to share with you, and there is some very nice section that I won't share here because it's too long, but it's too nice to not say anything about that. So let me share it with you as a homework, an extra homework today, if you will like, for these days. So because it's a very nice commentary that Vishwanath, long one, very long one, but very nice, that Vishwanath shares in the Bhagavad about how Yogamaya is facilitating the Leela. So please, if you can study Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary to one verse of the Bhagavad, which is the verse 10th canto, chapter 45, verse 25. And if you don't have the book, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's Sarartha Darshini commentary to the Bhagavad, I will share with you here in the chat if you want. I have a link. I have uploaded a PDF file containing only this verse and the purport. So I uploaded that to my Dropbox. So there I'm sharing in the link here, in the chat, the link. So for those who will hear this audio that I'm recording now later, you won't have access to this link, so you can ask me through private message. But here I'm sharing now here in present moment in the chat, so you can check it. These days, I think that will be a very nice way to make at least some type of full circle regarding this topic. So that's all for now. So if you have any questions, commentaries, whatever you may like to share, we have some extra minutes, of course. You can activate your microphone, or you can also share it in a written way via chat as you prefer.
Maharaj, I didn't see it in the chat.
Yes, it's there in the chat. I don't know if the rest can see it, but I have sent it in the chat. No, I sent a link. I sent a link for you to download the PDF file with the verse and the commentary.
Oh, okay. Okay.
If you don't find it, or for whatever reason, you send me later a private message and I will share that with you.
Okay, thank you.
No, thank you. So, what else? Any
Maharaj,
questions?
I have, I'm gonna, Hare Krishna, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Maharaj?
I can hear you.
I'm gonna borrow Brigu's phrase of I have a doubt.
Okay.
So I
Yeah, Brigo is not today, so someone has to play his role, please.
have to play. So I have a doubt. You talk about how the devotee has an atomic particle of prema.
Mm-hmm.
My question is, even it seems like how could even an atomic particle of prema be overwhelmed by the Maya Shakti, which seems to happen even in a sadhaka's journey?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, actually, when I say atomical particle of prema, and I actually quoted Ananta Das Babaji in that point, I mentioned that it was his commentary. I will say it's a way of saying that. Strictly speaking, we could say it's bhakti. It's like when Guru Maharaj says, try to get the idea. Guru Maharaj said, in every devotee, there is a little bit of Radha. So you could say that you could present the same question. How can Radharani become covered by Maya Shakti or something like that? And of course, we won't say that. So it's a way of trying to give us an idea. There is a little bit of Radha because Radha is the ultimate personification of bhakti. So bhakti is there. And Radha is the ultimate personification of prem, if you will. I mean, that's even more to say there's a little bit of Radha in every devotee. That's even more to say there is some atomic manifestation of prem. So it's a way of trying to make us think of bhakti and its prospect. No, bhakti is not only bhakti. Bhakti is ultimately personified. Bhakti has the potential of becoming eventually not only bhakti or sadhana bhakti, but bhava bhakti and prem bhakti. So there is a potential there, but due to its atomic presence, now it's not fully exerting that influence. But again, Maya Shakti is there, but if we are sincere sadhakas, I mean, it's only a matter of time that Maya Shakti will retire and Bhakti will advance and conquer all the directions. So, because the same way we could say, we are sadhakas, as I would say, we are not conditioned souls, but we are not siddhas. But there is some level of siddhi and some level of conditioning living together in us. There is some degree of perfection manifested by the mercy of bhakti entering into our hearts. There is some purification, some insight, some experiences, but also there is some conditioning proportionate to our present situation. So it's not black and white, and it doesn't mean that because of that our bhakti is affected by Maya Shakti. No, the bhakti that came to our life is under the influence of Maya Shakti. No, it's not like that. No? So Maya, the example, sometimes analogies will serve to this. No, sometimes the example is given of the sun. So the sun is there, we are here, we can see the sun, but suddenly a cloud comes in between. So the cloud is not affecting the sun. Sun has to do with bhakti. And we are the seers of the sun. But when the cloud comes, we maybe only see the cloud. And if too many clouds come, we may perceive the sun even less. And if the cloud is just moving a little bit, we are receiving some rays of the sun, and so on. So there's analogy again. So that will be the point, basically. No, it's a way of speaking about that. It's strictly speaking, as we mentioned already, bhava. What to speak of prem? Bhava, it's mentioned nitya siddhasya bhavasya prakatyam hridi sadhyata. Bhava will descend from the hearts of the nitya associates of Krishna from Golok. At certain point, when our heart is prepared by sadhana, bhava will make its descent and will reveal in our heart our particular identity. So prem is an intensification of bhava. So in that sense, we could say prem is not there. That will descend eventually from that heart. But at the same time, all the things will happen when we properly embrace what that thing that's already in us, which is sad bhakti in a particular level of descent, if you will. There are ways of saying, no? We could also say, okay, your Guru Maharaj gave you Harinam, gave you Diksha, and he has prem. So he shared the mantra in your ear, and that mantra is imbibed in his prem. So you received that in one way. I mean, it doesn't mean that you already achieved prem, but you receive the opportunity to take advantage of that particular connection. So that will be a way of saying Prem is in your life in an atomic way. I mean, actually, Prem is in your life in an intensified way in the form of the premikas, the prema-like devotees who are surrounding your life. But since we are not yet able to take full advantage of that, we may say Prem is atomically present, if you will. So there are so many ways of speaking about that. So I hope that helps, and I didn't confuse too much the audience with that particular quoting and expression.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Something else? Okay, so there are no more questions, so I think we can finish here. So thank you very much to all of you. We will see each other next Monday. We will be finishing, I hope, this 6th verse in our next meeting. So see you there. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Srila Gurudev ki jai. Shriman Mahaprabhu ki jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai. Shri Shri Raga-vartma-candrika ki jai. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur ki jai. Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Gaur Premananda Haribo. Panchakalpatarubhyashta kripa
Shripad Bhakti Pranaya Padmanabh Maharaj ki jai.
Gaur Haribo.